we'll bring John McMullen in to find out because, John, it seems like there's a whole heck of a lot of news out there, but none of it's really confirmed, so we'll tap into you and see what you know is the latest on Eagles-Lions. What's going on, pal?
Doing well. How are you guys?
All is well. All right, let's go. Where do we start? Let's go Alshon Jeffries, I guess. Let's get the dirt there. Last night, Ann Rappaport putting out a tweet that said that he could be out multiple games, that he is there's a possibility because of the way the schedule lines up here that some of these soft tissue injuries might rear their head for not one but two games.
Yeah, bad spot for the Thursday night game coming up after this Sunday's game against Detroit. So you have the quick turnaround, and that creates a bigger issue. I think we kind of know Tim Jernigan, he's out for a while, probably 4 to 6 weeks. Corey Clement's going to miss probably both of those games. So that's what you'll see. And then I think the Eagles are going to play some sort of competitive advantage cards with the soft tissue injuries, but I do think Alshon is less likely of the two to play. If anybody's going to play, it's going to be Deshaun Jackson on Sunday, and I would lean towards not, but maybe back on Thursday. And Dallas Goedert is really a wild card because nobody's kind of pinned that down. The fact that, remember, he had that calf injury from the first preseason game. Eagles shut him down. He aggravated it, same injury. So that could be a concern as well. A lot of issues, no question about it. And Mike Groh, obviously the coordinators never give you updates on injuries. And sure sounded like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Mac Hollins are going to be in the game plan this week. So I think that tells you a lot.
Yeah, it seemed that Groh also, you kind of hinted it, but he indicated that if they needed Jackson last week, he could have kind of gone, which I guess would make you feel better. But I would assume that if he's even, at 85%, they're not going to try to push him, and you're going to see a scaled-back wide receiving core most likely on Sunday.
Yeah, and Doug kind of mentioned that as well. I mean, if it's a playoff game, it's a must-win atmosphere, I think everybody tries to push through. But the fact that it was week 2 and you want to be cautious, especially with veteran players, and you don't want to turn, which is a 1-2 week injury, into 8 or 10 weeks. We go back to Darren Sproles last season with the hamstring. I think that's the concern. But you also have to, and Jim Schwartz talks about this all the time, there's only 16 of these things, so they're all important. It's not baseball. It's not 162. It's not the Sixers. It's not 82. It's only 16 of them. So that's a tough kind of tightrope to walk.
So with the potential of all of the names that, Mike and yourself just went through being out for the matchup against the Lions, obviously on Sunday it was last minute and the coaching staff and Doug couldn't really plan and prepare and adjust the game plan accordingly, but now this week they seemingly can. What are some adjustments or differences that we can anticipate the Eagles to make if the D-Jaxes and the Alshon Jeffries of the world are not going to be seeing the field against Detroit at the Link?
Well, the big difference is you game plan with those players in mind, and that is a big difference. I wrote about it earlier in the week. I think a lot of people don't realize how you prepare as an NFL team in the regular season. And it's basically everybody is trying to help the first-team guys, the key contributors, get ready for that particular week's opponent. So you talk about guys like Arcega-Whiteside and Mac Hollins who are not scheduled to play a lot. Well, they're playing Julio Jones in practice. This week, they'll be with Carson Wentz. And you saw some of the miscommunication early in the first half. They're not running routes with Carson during the week, and that changes. So you do expect it to be a little bit better because you are able to game plan with those particular players in mind. But then the second part is you also have to be realistic and understand starters are starters for a reason. And Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson at this stage are better players, certainly. The Eagles think Arcega-Whiteside particularly has a huge upside, but he's not there yet. So that becomes the bigger issue this week if you don't have those guys. you're playing guys who aren't as good.
What are your thoughts on the offensive line and really just the trenches in general? If you want to touch on the defensive line as well, but the offensive in particular, that's been the strong suit with this team. And going into this season, you feel good about the offensive line and even the defensive line with Chris Long going elsewhere and off into the sunset. You still felt good about it, but through 2 games, I don't really know how to assess either. Are you looking at these areas of the team as a concern, as a question mark? How do you see it?
No, a little bit at defensive tackle, certainly, and that's injury-wise. That's where the injuries have hit on the defensive side of the ball. You lose 2 guys in 2 weeks, 2 of your top 3 interior players in Malik Jackson and Tim Jernigan. So that's a concern, but that's from an injury standpoint. Offensively, hey, I always preach context, and while a lot of Philadelphia fans are myopic, as every fan base is, and they look at their team and they don't look at other teams, there are a lot of bad offensive lines in this league. The Eagles have one maybe average to below average offensive lineman in Isaac Seumalo. He had a difficult game because he was playing against Grady Jarrett. We knew that was a bad matchup coming in. We mentioned it. That's one of the best 3 or 4 defensive tackles in the entire NFL. And he blew him up a bunch of times. So I think that was something that should have been expected to a certain extent. But I think as a whole, offensive line remains a major strength of this team moving forward.
Yeah, John McMullen is with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Football at 4, Eagles getting ready for the Lions. Jernigan with that broken foot issue. Has we gotten anything cleared up on that, in terms of how long he might be out? And then, what the plan is going to – I know we kind of touched on it yesterday about what the plan could be there, but now Jim Schwartz got a chance to kind of, air out his ideas. So anything new with what that defensive tackle position is going to look like?
Well, we won't know concrete until Doug talks tomorrow. From what everyone is saying behind the scenes, it's a cracked bone in his foot, so it's best case scenario, probably 4 weeks, probably a month. Worst case scenario, probably 8 weeks, 2 months, maybe in the middle, 4 to 6 weeks is what most timetables have. So Tim's going to be out for a while, and that was the most significant injury coming out of the game, and it could have been much worse. Short term, though, we talked about those 2 games coming up over the next 9-10 days. You might have to do some roster juggling. It could be difficult. Because if you don't have Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey, well, you need a body at wide receiver. So maybe it's Greg Ward from the practice squad. You're going to need a tight end. Dallas Goedert's not able to go. They have Alex Ellis. They have Josh Perkins on the practice squad. Defensive tackle, they have Bruce Hector. But if you bring 1 or 2 of those players up, obviously you have to release players. So there has to be some juggling if some of these guys aren't going to be able to play over the next 10 days, and even maybe something as drastic as putting Tim Jernigan on injured reserve. If they think it's going to be closer to 8 weeks, they can bring him back, designate him to return, and bring him back. So I think the shuffling of the back end of the roster, that's going to be something to keep an eye on this week.
John, a lot of talk has been on the cornerback position, the secondary. Jalen Ramsey, obviously his name is going to be coming up until his destination is finally reached elsewhere. When you talk about Ronald Darby, how much of a quote-unquote leash is he going to have here to prove himself as deserving in that role, and what are your thoughts on the secondary moving forward?
I think it's a weakness right now. Jim kind of dismissed Ronald coming back from the ACL. I think and it's proven. We've seen it with other players. We saw it with Carson Wentz. And for whatever reason, people want to ignore it. The history is pretty clear when it comes to ACLs and people not feeling comfortable early in the process. Hopefully he starts feeling a little bit better and a little more confident each and every week. He's in no danger of being benched, if that's what people are asking. This team believes he's their best corner. They still believe that. But the position as a whole is a weakness right now. I think that's fair to say. And, yeah, if they can get Jalen Ramsey, that's the best cornerback in football, arguably. So, I mean, he could help any team in this league. He could certainly help this team. But it's going to cost a lot, and I don't think the Eagles are going to be in that mix.
Right. I was going to just bring up, last night we saw the Steelers give up a first-round pick to go out and get, a 22-year-old player that's really going to help their defense. Does Howie say, you know what, we're going to be – their first-round pick probably not going to be even enough to get it done, right? I mean, let's start there. Do the Eagles have enough to get it done?
Yeah, that's a perfect example. I mean, Fitzpatrick would have been a good fit as well. But their first-round pick is not nearly as valuable as Pittsburgh's now that Ben has gone down. So Miami's kind of rolling the dice and assuming they're going to fall apart, and that's going to be top 15, maybe even top 10 pick. And all of a sudden, that becomes much more desirable for a team like Miami, whereas Philadelphia, hey, even if they have a bad year, they're going to be in the 20s. So, yeah, I don't think they do have the ammunition to get something like that done. And Ramsey's only going to cost more. I mean, if you're Jacksonville and Fitzpatrick's a very good player, but Ramsey is an all-pro level player already. Now, there are other issues. He doesn't have as much time on his contract. You're going to have to pay him a whole heck of a lot of money. But I can't imagine they would take less than a first-round pick. It's going to be starting at a first-round pick and more, and I don't think the Eagles are going to be in that equation.
So I've gotten this a lot. Just one more real quick on Ramsey. Is Darby a possibility in a trade? Is Douglas a possibility in a trade? Like, how serious do you think Howie is in these potential talks, or is that not even an option?
Well, I mean, I think for Jacksonville, not for Miami. I mean, people always throw out names. You have to ask yourself, why would Miami want this player? Or why would Jacksonville want this player? Jaguars are a little bit different. Maybe they would take a cornerback because they would need a corner, and they're a little bit more competitive, at least, although obviously they lost their quarterback as well. So who knows how they're thinking right now. Maybe they go in the opposite direction and say, well, we're not going to be competitive anyway, so we might as well try to lose games just like the Dolphins and take that NBA mentality, and then it becomes less valuable. Then they wouldn't want a player like that. So you always have to look at other sides. But we know in sports, guys, everybody's trying to give their direct to another team, and the other team is usually smarter, and they don't want your direct. So let's put it that way. Yeah. Not that Ronald is, but the Eagles aren't looking to trade Ronald Darby.
Well, let's go down this road then. There's a couple NFL topics we want to dive into. Miami, Cleveland kind of did it. People are kind of looking at a bad league right now. I know we always say there's not tanking in the NFL, but are more teams more inclined to throw seasons away? We should say you never want to throw a season away in the NFL. You never know what can happen. But are teams now becoming more inclined to say, you know what? We don't have it this year. Let's go in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always, there's always been some of that. I mean, you can go back to...
but this is more extreme.
Yeah, I mean, I was at when Peyton Manning got hurt, for instance, in Indianapolis at that point said the so-called suck for Andrew Luck. So it's happened before. It usually happens in season. When something does happen, like you lose your quarterback and you say, okay, we're done. There's no use of trying to win games. So there always has been a level of tanking. The thought process is that there's worst to first every year. You really don't need to tank in the off season. So I think that's where you've seen the shift. And at an organization like Miami specifically, you mentioned Cleveland, did it in the past. Yeah, I think there has been a shift to where teams will go into a season in tank mode, and that's kind of surprising because history has proven if you make good decisions in the NFL, you can turn things around quickly. But other organizations don't have confidence in making good decisions, I guess.
Now, do you think, because we're seeing Minka ask for a trade, and I know there's some extreme circumstances, Ramsey, Brown, Le'Veon Bell, Gordon, are we getting more? Are the NFL players seeing their buddies in the NBA getting what they want and now saying, you know what? I want to get what I want. I don't want to play in this town. I want to play in that town with that guy. I want to go to this team over here. I don't want to play in this city anymore. Are the NFL players becoming a little jealous of the NBA friends?
Well, I think they've always been jealous from the contract standpoint, which we've talked about a lot. I mean, that's just the mass problem. They're never going to close that gap. But, yeah, I mean, this is unprecedented. And I joked about it today. I mean, Eagles fans, like every other group of fans, is saying, we've been through this 4 times now. Go get your Davian Clowney. Go get Melvin Gordon. Go get Minka Fitzpatrick. Go get Jalen Ramsey. These are high-profile players. They're not on the market typically in the NFL. This is unprecedented. It really is. So, yeah, I mean, there's been a sea change. I don't think it's good for the league. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's been good for the NBA. But once the toothpaste is out of the tube, I don't know how you stop it. And hey, when Miami sort of did what they're doing, I mean, it is really difficult, especially in this sport. We just talked about the Eagles' injuries and how violent this sport is, and you saw Trevor Siemian last night, and we've already seen Ben go down, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees this weekend, high-profile players. Do you really want to go out and put your body on the line for the Miami Dolphins when they're not trying to win? To me, it's a bigger issue with this sport than any other sport.
Yeah.
Because at least in baseball or basketball, yeah, there's always serious injuries. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's much less likely. In this sport, at some point you're going to get hurt. Zach Ertz always says it's 100% the injury rate in this league. If you play long enough, do you really want to go out there and put your body on the line for a team that essentially acknowledges we're not trying?
What did Spence, you guys talked to him about, the mentality down there. What did he have to say about it today?
Well, he said it's difficult, and he said at that point you just have to play for each other and look at the other 10 guys on the field with you. And I think that is, from a player's perspective, that's the only way you can get through something like that, because the organization has they've told you what they feel, and they feel they're going to tank. So all you can do is play for each other. And I think that can be powerful at times, especially if you have a locker room that really likes each other and really gets along. But that's why you see in the NFL, I always say, I've said this for years, if you're playing a bad team, you want to play them late. You don't want to play them early. You don't want to play them early because they know as the season starts to slip away, then you see guys, to be honest, giving up, because this is a difficult sport to play at a high level when you understand you're putting your body on the line and there's nothing at the end of the rainbow. No matter what you do, you know you're going to lose. It's tough to get through that in this league.
Yeah, but this isn't something new, John. The only thing that's new is tanking, and that's really more relatable to the NBA and professional baseball, in my opinion. Like, there's been bad teams in the NFL for, you probably know better than me and as well as anyone, for a very long time. And these guys still have a lot on the line. They're playing for a new contract. They're playing for pride. In the NFL, anyone can steal a game from anyone. We all know how the Miami Dolphins have looked through 2 weeks. But still, I feel like the organization it's a new excuse. Like, oh, we're tanking. Yeah, you stink.
Well, that's part of it. That's definitely part of it. But I do think there is a mentality difference. Look, Cleveland Browns, for the vast majority of their reboot since 1999, they've stunk. They've had one playoff appearance, but they were trying. They were trying that entire time until Sashi Brown came in and went in a different direction. And that's what I said. Bad teams are bad teams. There's always bad teams, but they were trying. And I think there is a difference. There is. And if you know your boss is trying, especially if you like them, you're probably going to give effort. If you know your boss isn't trying, you might have a different take on it. That's what I think is the difference.
John McMullen, we got to ask you today. The Giants have decided to make a change at quarterback, and a lot of reaction on the future of Eli Manning. You know, he's basically a 15-year veteran now, backup standing on the sidelines there. Some people have suggested, hey, maybe he should just retire, or does he last the season out? Does he, end up? But a lot of people always, the question about Eli comes into play. What will Eli's fate be when he finally does retire from the NFL?
Well, I think he's we've talked about this a lot, Mike. He's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. I think ultimately he will be a Hall of Fame quarterback because of his surname, because of the 2 Super Bowl rings. I think that ultimately gets him over the top. It's supposed to be the Hall of Fame. At his height, he was probably an above-average quarterback. Not probably he was, but it's not the Hall of above average. It's supposed to be the best of the best. His brother is among that group. He is not. And I think anybody who watches the game on a consistent basis comes to that conclusion, but other things sort of seep into it. And we always talk about it's so silly to give quarterbacks credit for winning Super Bowls, and it's so silly to blame them for not winning Super Bowls. Everyone in the industry calls it the ultimate team game. I think the best 2 examples are John Elway and Peyton Manning, because those are 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. John Elway was losing Super Bowls when he was great. He won them when he was at the end of his career, not playing all that well. Whereas Peyton Manning, to me, is the most consistent quarterback from week to week in NFL history. I've never seen more consistent greatness. I think his teams won 12 games, like 7 or 8 consecutive years. That's unbelievable. That is the ultimate guy. He wins number 2 in his worst season. And all those years where he was befuddling defensive coordinators, he gets 1. He plays absolutely horrible, gets benched at one point for Brock Osweiler, and then he wins a 2nd. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
He was always great. So anybody who uses that as a litmus test doesn't understand the league. It's not to take anything away. Eli deserves credit for getting hot, similar to Nick Foles here. Nick Foles deserves all the credit in the world for playing at a high level at the biggest moments, but he's not a consistently great quarterback. Eli's in that same category, better quarterback than that. I don't want to downplay him to that degree.
Wait, Nick Foles isn't getting into the Hall of Fame, you're saying?
Shocker, I know. But, it's interesting because people will say he won 2 Super Bowls. So he should be in a Hall of Fame. Well, Jim Plunkett would like a call, number 1, I would say to that. But the second would be, well, he's also a 500 quarterback, dead on 500 quarterback. Now, is that a Hall of Famer? I don't even think it's a conversation. I really don't.
No, and
if his name was Gill or McMullen or Rothstein, nobody is even putting him in the conversation to be a Hall of Famer.
No, and
my name for sure.
I'd get it. I'm a difficult grader with this, but I think, my point is, at no point in Eli Manning's career was he even ever an MVP candidate. Like, not even in the top 10. Close. The Hall of Fame shouldn't even be a conversation if you're not in if you're not an MVP candidate. The Hall of Fame is for the elite of the elite. Not, hey, I had 2 good runs, which he should be commended for. But he's a 500 guy.
I'll finish on this real quick. Arch horrible football teams.
There you go. Johnny Mack at JF McMullen, Football at 4, all guests up here via the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Thanks, pal.
All right. Thank you, guys.